Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on-demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data. So sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. Are you and your team members making confirmation calls to your vendors to confirm remittance information? If so, are you using confirmation call scripts? See how they can be valuable to prevent fraud and make the person receiving the call more apt to confirm their confirmation. This is the second episode in this series of 6. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 316, Confirmation Call Scripts number 2, adding bank details for ACH wire payments. Now, if you didn't hear it already, there is a prior episode, the one just before this one, episode 316, and it's called Confirmation Call Scripts number 1, changing bank details for ACH wire payments. And so if you need to go back and listen to that, please do. Plus, I have 4 other ones that are going to come up as well. Now, this one is going to be dealing with adding bank details, but the whole reason for this series is that there are a lot of problems with making that confirmation call. First off, it's not the bullet, the silver bullet that everybody thought it was going to be, or some people still think it is, to avoid fraudulent payments. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's just not the silver bullet. It's not the only thing you should do. But anyway, the problems that I've seen with making the confirmation call, and maybe you've seen some of these too, is that the vendors are not picking up the phone, or when you do contact them and they do answer the phone, whoever they are, the point of contact, they don't know who you are either. And just think about this, some random person calling your company or you while you're at your company and asking to validate banking. And so a lot of companies, for that reason, right? Because they don't know who you are, will say not to validate banking over the phone. And then another thing too is that the team members you have making the call reveal too much information. They actually tell them the information, and let's say they're making that phone call using the information in the email or on the invoice. And yes, you and I know that's not the right thing to do. But if you think about it from their point of view, they may not get that level of training, or they maybe have tried to call and couldn't find that information in your accounting system or ERP because contact information wasn't on the vendor record. And maybe they tried the internet, and maybe the vendor doesn't have an internet presence, or maybe they do, and the vendor took off the AR, accounts receivable, right, communication information for the same reason that you're calling, right, to prevent fraud. So I have seen that information being used, and when that is used, of course, that could be a fraudster that they are calling. Not to mention the fact, right, that many fraudsters, they know we're making that confirmation call, And so they are submitting a request to update contact information on your vendor record. So when you call the quote unquote vendor with using information in your vendor master file, you're actually still calling a fraudster. Anyway, so they're revealing too much information. So when you do call that fraudster, instead of trying to authenticate them by asking them things, you're just revealing that information and asking them to confirm. So that's another problem. And that the team members do not include authenticating information, right? Because you have to know who you're talking to. So you ask for information that exists on the vendor record that they should know. And then lastly, and I already talked about this, team members using the information in email or on the invoice. That's the issue. All right. So all of that, or most of that, can be solved with confirmation call scripts. Just tell them what to say, right? And say it in a way that makes the vendor's point of contact, whoever you're calling, more comfortable. And if for some reason it doesn't go well, there's a graceful way to exit the conversation, and you have authentication to boot. So let's talk about the second scenario, which is the adding the bank details. Again, in podcast 315, the one just from last week, it was changing bank details. And I started with that one first because that's the one that you'll probably run up against most often, right? For the year end, actually any time of the year, but especially at year end, because fraudsters are more active because they know we're more busy. All right. So adding bank details for ACH wire payment. Now, the first thing many of you may ask is, why do you need to confirm adding bank details? Well, because, right, even with a new vendor, you might have some fraud that's out there, or that could be perpetrated by a new vendor trying to be added to your vendor master file, right? So they can send a fake invoice, right? Or I've seen where it used to be that synthetic vendor or synthetic identities, meaning there is no real person, right, was just limited to individuals. Now there are actual vendors that they have expanded. The fraudsters have expanded to include vendors for B2B. So you want to make sure that even when you're adding a vendor, or this can also be the case where you are changing a vendor that has a check payment method, right, to a ACH or wire or some electronic payment method. And so you can't ask them the same thing that I put in the confirmation call script, right? When you listen to episode 315, you can't ask them the same thing. And so we're going to go and now talk about what that confirmation script format should be, or that I recommend when you're adding banking details for ACH wire payment. So the first step of that is to say, good morning, afternoon. My name is, and then you'll put your name, you'll say your name, and I am reaching out from, and you will say your company. Now, they may or may not know that, someone in their business is doing business with you, but you put you say your company name, and then you put at the request of, and you can have your internal employee name or the name at their company that your internal team member is dealing with. So either one that you think in that situation that your vendor or the AR person at your vendors, right, would know, and use that name. And what that does is it does a couple of things. It, one, identifies that you are from your company and you do have either the internal employee name or the employee name at the vendors, that the person that you are dealing with would know. And that does put them a little bit more at ease. And I will tell you, I had this happen to me because I hadn't yet had anyone that reached out to me when I onboarded at one of my clients as a new vendor. And so this happened, and we actually came up with, it was pretty good. It was a confirmation cost script, but we came up with with a improved or enhanced cost script, which this is, in order to make sure that we didn't spook them, because I was asked to tell at that time my whole bank account number, and I think also routing number, but it was at least the whole bank account number. And I was not comfortable saying that over the phone to someone that I'd never met before. What made it tolerable was the fact that they did indicate the name of the person that I was working with. And so what I did is I had already submitted my information. This was just a confirmation. I said, if you can, confirm the last 5 digits of the routing number that I submitted, I will confirm the last 5 digits of the bank account number. And so we kind of had a little bit of a truce. But you see how that works. It made me feel a little bit more comfortable that I was dealing with the client that I thought I was dealing with, even though I'd never heard of the person that was making the call, right? Never met them before. It made me feel comfortable. It also made me feel much more comfortable when they were able to validate, give me correctly the last 5 digits of the routing number. So what we're going to do here, though, is we've already built in that information to make sure that they are comfortable. And then if they ask you to do that, I would do the same thing that I did. You can revise it on the fly, right? It's a script, but you always have people that will sometimes come outside of the script. Anyway, that's what happened with me. So let's keep going. So just to start over here, good morning, afternoon. My name is, I am reaching out from, at the request of either the internal employee or your internal employee that they're working with. You have been recently set up as a vendor in our system. We have received a request to add banking for electronic payments. A confirmation of the banking submitted for payment is required to complete this request. And then you ask, are you the right person that can confirm banking information for your company? Because you just don't want to start asking things to someone that's not correct, especially if you had to go hunting for the number, right? You don't know if that's the right person. And if they say no, then you ask, can you provide a number for a more appropriate team member that can provide that information? And if they say no, gracefully exit. Thank you for your time. I will follow up internally. But if they say yes, then you can say something like, great, can you please confirm the last 5 digits of the tax ID? And remember, this is potentially, right, a new vendor. It could be a new vendor. It could be an existing vendor. But if it's a new vendor, if it's a new vendor or an existing vendor, you can always ask to confirm the last 5 digits of the tax ID. Because what you're trying to do is confirm, authenticate the data. So authenticating the data, you can use tax ID. You can use other information that might be on the vendor request. Maybe if it's a PO vendor, you can ask for the buyer, right? If that name hasn't been used. And so you need some information to make sure that they are who you think you are, you think that they are, and not, right, a fraudster that was able to get their telephone number added to the vendor master file before they sent that request for, to convert from a check payment method to a electronic payment. And so in this case, so I've treated it as if it's a new vendor. And for all new vendors, we do collect the tax ID. So I would ask to confirm the last 5 digits of the tax ID. And if that was correct, then the next thing I would say is, would you also confirm the last 5 digits of the routing number and the last 5 digits of the bank account number? Now, you may wonder why you keep asking for the last 5 digits. Well, number one, This keeps the person that is making the phone call from revealing any information that could have been used to authenticate that the vendor is who they say they are, and they just haven't contacted the fraudster, right? So it is confirming that, but also it's asking for the last 5 digits because that's all you really need. And you don't want the vendor, because you don't know where the vendor is working from. A lot of people are working hybrid. They could be, in a library, they could be at a co-working space, they could be at home, right, with roommates. You don't want them revealing the entire banking information that someone else could overhear, because at that point, then you're exposing unnecessarily sensitive private information. And so all you really need is the last 5 digits. That includes the tax ID as well. You don't want them to say it because you don't know where they are. Now, if it was successful, you could say thank you for confirming, and then you can ask them for their email address so that you can send them a confirmation once the information has been added. That's really great, because now guess what? You got another email address. That's always good. But if it's not successful, again, you need some verbiage so that you can gracefully exit the conversation. And so here's what I use. That information does not match what was submitted. Thank you for your time. I will follow up internally. And there you go. And so using that, it is, again, a graceful way to exit the conversation. All right, so that was the confirmation call script for adding banking details for ACH or wire payment. This could be for a new vendor setup, or it could be for an existing vendor that has a check payment method, but you want to convert them to an ACH or wire payment. Now, there are a total of 6 in this series. The first one was change bank details for ACH wire payment. And that was episode 315. This is episode 316. I have 4 more coming up. The next one, or the next 2, one will be adding remittance address for check payment, and one will be changing the remittance address for check payments. Because guess what? You probably already knew this, but check fraud has increased, and fraudsters are not above asking you to change remittance addresses for their checks. Also adding the remittance address for new vendors. And I don't know if I've ever seen anyone convert back from a check, from a electronic payment method back to a check payment method, but you never know. So I have one for that as well. And then I also have, actually, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's 4 more. So I have one where there's an email request to contact them back, and then also a voicemail. I may combine that into one, so it may just be 3 more. But make sure you tune in for the next episodes to get additional confirmation call scripts so you can have the whole set. All right, that is it for today. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 316th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.